So tonight I invited my brother-in-law and sister-in-law to come visit with us about their adventures in preservation. And there's quite a few different avenues that life has taken them through. Does Kent and Val Van Kooten like to come up?
I will tell you that in looking at these together and kind of talking about it, we have some different recollections of things. So we'll see how close we come to an agreement on some of these things. To start with, moving a house was never on my bucket list or anything. It wasn't something that oh, we should move a house, but it came at the right time, and it came, well, everything kind of worked together for that to happen. So that's what it was. A little bit of background. We were living, in 1990, we moved into a house at the corner of University and Broadway, just catty-cornered from Central College, across the street from the big blue house that was just moved a year or two ago. We bought the house from Dick and Anita Whitaker, and it was a big old barn of a house, impossible to heat. It was a great house. Our kids grew up on Central's campus and lots of kids in the neighborhood. But on the Thursday night of tulip time in 1996, horrible rainstorm, our house was hit by lightning and we had a fire. And most of the upstairs was destroyed. So after living with my folks for a couple weeks, we had the whole house cleaned. We moved back down into the downstairs for about 7 or 8 months, but we knew we couldn't, the house was too far gone to try to redo it. We really wanted to move to the country, but there was really nothing available. We ended up buying a little house on Franklin Street that was across from Pella Christian Grade School on the dead end there, and moved over there kind of as a stop point, not knowing where we were going to go from there. This house, we ended up selling to Larry DeVries, and there is a condo there on the corner.
Yeah, I remember that night, the rain was coming down, and I think really, not that it was worth saving, but it rained about 3 inches that night. We also own a rental property, and we got a call from the tenants the next morning and said they needed some help, they had water in the basement. I got my own problems here. You're going to have to call my brother-in-law, and he's going to have to help you out. But I think that really what saved the house. We would have lost everything. I think the rain, as hard as it was raining, kept the house cool, kept the roof cool, because it was burning right under the shingles, and it never did protrude through the shingles. It was burning underneath that. So I think that really what helped save everything that we had in the house is just that rain that night.
Yeah. So we bundled up our 3 little boys and our, I think, 6 cats and kittens, and moved over to my folks' house for a while. So that was the background. We were on Franklin Street in a little tiny house with 3 boys. It worked well because they went to Christian grade school, so they liked being able to walk back and forth to school. But we knew we wanted to eventually get to the country. And my parents had offered us some land, but there was no house on it. And we looked at a lot of options. We looked at possibly building, and I just did not want to build. I've never lived in a new house. I didn't want a new house. I just didn't want to spend the money on a new house. So we thought we didn't know really what to do. And then one day we saw that Third Reformed Church was wanting somebody to move a house. I don't have a good picture of the front beforehand. Bruce found this one here on the left, so thanks for that. But it's the second house down, right there. The one next to it is still there. It's owned by Maxine Bross, and you can. I took a picture this morning of what the area looks like now. Our house stood where that car is in the parking lot, and those houses were built by brothers. And our house is almost exactly like Maxine's. A little different proportions. Our kitchen is smaller and our living room is bigger, whereas her kitchen is bigger and her living room is smaller. But other than that, they're pretty much pretty close to each other. So we walked into this house and there were bay windows in the dining room, and then straight across in the bedroom, mirrored. And I said, we've got to have this house. And he said, you are totally nuts. And that's not the first time I've heard that from him in my life. So I did not let that deter me in any way, shape, or form.
Probably won't be the last either.
I've dragged him into a lot of interesting things over the years. But we looked at the house, and Third Reformed was in the process. You can see the old church there yet on the left photo. They were in the process of tearing that down. They wanted to move this one. It had been owned by the church as their parsonage at one time. So it had a lovely office, which I really liked for the pastor. It was being used when we looked at it as a counseling center. It had been used as a youth group. We were shocked that it was in great shape. I mean, none of the woodwork had ever been painted over, nothing. I mean, it was built in 1919, but the woodwork was in wonderful shape. And so we started looking at moving a house. And at that time in Pella, there were a lot of people moving houses. Central was moving a lot of them off. The hospital was moving them off. So it wasn't so unusual, but everybody said to us, oh, you can't move a brick house. And this was before Jerry and Elaine Van Wyk moved the big house from Central. And we thought, well, why can't we move a brick house? So we got a hold of Ron Holland in Forest City, Iowa. And what did he have to say?
Well, actually, Jerry's house was moved before this one.
Was it?
Yeah. And I talked to Jerry, and I thought, okay, if he can move Jerry's house, he can move this house. And as I was talking with Jerry at one point, he said he knew he could have got his house moved cheaper, but he knew Ron's qualifications, and Ron actually is one who builds equipment to move houses and then sells it to other moving companies. So, okay, if the guys that's building this stuff can do that, and I figured this house was a little smaller, so I knew because of the brick, I thought I'm going to go with Ron. And we talked to Ron and got him down to look at it and kind of went from there.
Yeah. Could somebody bring me my glass of iced tea or something over there? Wendy, would you be willing to? Yeah. Oh, and this is one it's kind of dark, but thank you. These are our two boys at the time. Cameron was about 8 and Ethan was about 6, and they were on the front steps of the house. We really tried to be able to move that beautiful tree, what a tulip tree or magnolia tree or whatever it is. It was so old and so twisted, and the horticulture people said, no, you'll never be able to move it. So we had to leave it. But there's the house with the one right next door to it. Yeah. Okay, then reality hit.
After getting Ron down here, kind of gave a rundown of what we needed to do and all those things, and it turned out to be a lot of work. I spent a lot of nights there. One of the things you got to do when you move a house is you got to take all the infrastructure out underneath. So all the duct work for all of the furnace and all that had to come out. The nice thing is you can just bring it upstairs and leave it in the house, and he'll move it for you. You don't have to haul it over there and try to keep a place to put it. So. But keeping all that straight and labeling everything so it all goes back in the same way was a lot of fun. And then taking all the brick off around the bottom kind of, and then when you move a brick house, you got to have about twice as many beams going across as what you do with just a standard house because of just the sheer weight.
Yeah, Kent and his brother Calvin spent a summer there taking brick off, and it was a lot of work. Once we did that, it was getting the permit and working with the city. About every city department had to sign off on it. We had to have routes approved. They didn't like our routes. They would propose a route. We didn't like their routes. So finally, we got routes approved. We had to notify everybody on the route that their electricity might be out. And it was like over 300 people. So my kids and I went from door to door, giving them little pieces of paper and saying, your electricity might be out. It was like a week ahead. About 2 days before the move, we got a phone call from the city and they said, well, it's not gonna work that day. And we're like, what do you mean? They said, well, electrical department, they've got too many guys out deer hunting. This was the middle of December, right? First or second week in December. So we had to reschedule, go back around to all 300 people and stick things in their mailboxes. And finally, everything got approved with insurance. I mean, there were things we'd never thought about. We had to go through the schools because we couldn't be on the road during the school day, or during the day when the buses would be on the road. So we had to make sure it was a day that there was not an early out. There were just tons and tons of red tape. It took us several months to get that. He was busy taking off break and I was busy dealing with permits and things like that.
We couldn't leave the house until after school. Buses had arrived at school and we had to be done beforehand. And we got some photos of on the route, but what they originally wanted us to do, the city, they wanted us to get on Main Street, head south to University Street, and then head out Idaho Drive toward Eagle Creek, head around toward, was that T-15 over there?
Back of us.
And then come around the other side of Washington Street, past Westport, and go that way.
And there were railroad crossings.
The railroad lights were still up at that time. And they wanted $4,000 to take the railroad lights down and put them back up. But the railroad was no longer being used anymore. And so, thankfully, that was one of the advantages of having Ron Holland from Forest City move the house. He had a lot of respect in this community for the work that he's done. And so he had some proposals, we looked at some routes with him, and he gave us some ideas. And as that city council member, one of the city councilmen said, to my understanding, that very little chance that railroad's ever going to be opened back up in my lifetime. Electrical director said, I understand 100%, but that's what they want, $4,000. Well, I'm Dutch enough, I'm not going to do that. I know what they was going to do. They was going to take them down and never put them back up. They wanted me to pay for it, so I was a little bit smarter than them on that time. And so we come up with a different proposal, and with the respect that Ron had, since it was his idea, or his thought, they took that to heart and followed that suggestion.
Yeah, and I guess I forgot to tell you back when we were negotiating with Third Reformed on the house, we made them an offer of $500. We were the only offer they had. And they came back and said, you know, for that kind of money, we're just going to scrap it out. We'll have somebody from Des Moines come down and just scrap it out. And I just felt sick, and I wrote in this big long letter, and I said, please don't do that. You'll be taking a house off the tax rolls. You know, I pulled everything I could think of. You know, we really need a house. This is the house for us. And they finally said, okay. So we got the house for $500.
And Ron also commented the day of the move, he says, we're not moving a house. He says, we're preserving. And I think that's the big thing. And he also kind of commented the recycling. You know, it's going to stay the same form, but we're not just filling a landfill with it. We're preserving what's there.
Okay, moving day arrived, and actually this picture they were a little bit out of order. You want to tell them about the route?
Yeah, so what we did is, if you remember the picture there, the current area where it is, the big wall right next to the Ross house and where the parking lot was, there was a similar wall on the side of our house by the Third Reformed parking lot. So they actually rolled the house on their beams out into that parking lot, and then they got under it and we went to the alley toward the community center. And then we headed south to, is that Union there?
Yeah.
So right there we're pulling out of that alley between what is now the library and the community center, and we're heading east over to Main. And then we're going to head down Main Street, and we're just going to turn there on Independence, and then we're actually going to go up. Right here's the corner of Independence. You can see, I believe, in the far background, that's the smokestack there from the old power plant. That's Central Dining Hall there on the right side of the picture. So we turned on Broadway Street then and headed north on Broadway. And then we went up to Washington Street there and then turned left and headed out of town that way.
Yeah, we took off there was a back porch, you can see right behind the cab of the truck. There was a big back porch on this house that was not in good shape, was not worth moving. So we added a breezeway later, but that stayed there.
It was pretty long also, and that's why Ron suggested we take it off. But if you look, not very typical to some of the houses he moves, but this one, but he's got 4 sets of the dollies underneath there. And when he raises the house, he's got hydraulic pumps that lift everything, and he can read the gauges. And he says that weighs 90 ton, what that house weighs. I think he said Jerry's Van Wyck's, which come right from that corner right behind there, was about 110 ton. So it's a little smaller, but this has got a big double fireplace, or a double chimney through it, because it's got a fireplace and then also for the furnace work.
Yeah, I'm there on the left. That's my oldest son, Colin. I think he was asking for money, if I remember correctly. Probably be right.
Interesting about this truck that Ron has, this is a pretty new, big old Mack. And he's got the sign on the side that said, if you can't run with a big dog, stay on the porch. So I've got confidence in him on that too, so.
He told us when we left, he put an open can of Pepsi on the mantle of our fireplace. He said, if this spills, I'll take y'all out for dinner. Never sat there, never moved.
If you see behind there, there's a little garage. There was a little garage on that property as well, right near the driveway that was just a good solid little garage, but that thing had brick on it that matched the house. Well, I wasn't gonna be able to move that very well because it'd be so heavy. So again, I knocked all the brick off of that thing. And what's the bricklayer's name?
Vanderheiden?
Yeah, Fred Vanderheiden. He said, you know, you want to save those brick because he said if you ever have to repair some, you'll never find some to match. So I loaded up brick and hauled them home, dumped them out, loaded up brick, hauled them home and dumped them out, and I hauled and hauled brick and hauled brick until I was sick of hauling brick. And we took the garage with it. I had a borrowed trailer from a brother-in-law and put my tractor on it, and then we pulled that right behind it. I didn't ask permission from the city. We had permission to move the house permit. But I just jumped in behind and we left, and my brother's there driving the tractor, and I don't know what I was doing, but we just followed him, act like we knew what we was doing.
We needed a lot of that brick later on to put back on, and if you ask my kids their most hated memories, their most hated jobs in their life, number 1 will probably be planting pumpkins, because they always complain about that. Number 2 would be cleaning brick. They had to knock out, I don't know what, plaster?
Yeah, the mortar.
Mortar. And so we had to have a set number every day. Just, I'd say you have to do 50 today, and then you can go play or whatever. Oh, they whined and whined about that.
And Fred knew what color brick we had because he put them back on. And so every once in a while he'd come and he said, can I get a couple brick from you? And he'd give us $5 or $10 and take a few bricks and go fix somebody else's property.
We still have a bunch of bricks though.
Oh, we got a lot of bricks out there. We could redo that garage.
We'll get the grandkids to clean them the next time. Yeah, this is my favorite picture. It was in a frame on my wall. This is coming around off the square onto Washington. You can see the stop lights are all lifted. And it was, at that time, this was 1998, the electrical people and the city police charged $400 an hour to do that. So, yeah.
We got down as far as, I believe it was about West 3rd, and it was lunchtime. And so we stopped, and you know, everybody wanted to have some lunch, so that was fine. Well, I went to pay the city bill, and she was going through it with me, and it was like $50 for pizza. I said, why am I paying $50 for pizza? Well, union contract says if you make them work through their lunch hour, you gotta buy them lunch. Guess I bought them lunch.
Finally, we got to just west of town, and if you don't know where we are, we're down the dead-end strip where you turn by Larry DeVries or Family Dentistry, and instead of turning onto the road where John DeVries had his Christmas lights, you go straight. And we're at the very end there, back in the field. This was a horribly wet winter. And we had a terrible time getting, the basement was the basement laid by the time?
No, he would not let us do the basement first. He wanted to place the house in place and then have build the basement underneath because he did not want to roll that house out over top that hole with those basements, because it is a walkout now to the northwest side. He didn't want to roll that over top of there.
Yeah, and it was so wet, they could not get in to do the basement. Finally, our insurance company was pushing us to get it done, and finally, they pumped all the concrete in from the end of the dead-end road, got the basement in, brought the house in. For the first month or so, we had no cement and a very primitive driveway, and if we went to church or anywhere, we'd wear our gum boots and bring our shoes along and put them on when we got there. So it was just a muddy mess that fall.
We had to widen the driveway to get around the corner, and everything was so soft out there that it sat out in the highway for a month before we could get in. And finally, we had a frozen time period, and Ron knew that and quit come down and got it pulled into place and got it set so then we could go from there.
Yeah, we ended up building on the back a breezeway and a garage. That's the only thing we added. We remodeled the kitchen inside. The kitchen was really bad. It was, part of the ceiling was caving in. He thought it was fine. He said, oh, we can live with this. I said, no, I cannot live with this kitchen. So we redid the kitchen, added the breezeway, and that was really about all we did for several years. Today, the ceilings, I fell in love with those ceilings from day one. It's very arts and crafts, and our fireplace, which we use pretty much every night in the winter. My office, when we bought this, it was 2 little rooms in front, an office and then like an entryway. We knocked that out and opened the whole thing up. It's my office, and also you can see it's my grandkids' toy area.
You can barely see it on the right-hand side of that right picture, but there's a nice bookcase that was in there.
Yeah.
Not original by any means, but I think the church put that in there. It's really nice, matches everything. And that's the original way the windows were placed. We just put replacement windows in there, but that's the way they were. Most of those, although we never changed the outer structure of that at all. And all the woodwork inside too was very, very good shape.
Yeah, it was. Our kitchen, when we redid the kitchen, years before this, I don't know, anybody know what year Lincoln School was torn down?
1994.
94, okay, so about 3-4 years before this, my uncle had the contract to do that, and he let us come in and buy a whole bunch of ceiling tiles from the school. My mom and I each bought them. We thought we had enough for probably a whole house. And when I decided to use these in the kitchen, I had just enough barely to do the kitchen. It took more than what you think. And our carpenter at the time, they were in really bad shape. They were rusty and they were kind of warped. And we had scrubbed them down with steel wool. And then Charlotte Campman came and painted them and put kills on them. But our carpenter said, he did not want to put these up. And he says, in a week, you're going to be paying me to take all these down again. And I said, well, that may be. I don't know. After they were up and they were painted and they looked really nice, he was taking people through, and I told him I was going to start charging them for that. We had some of the extra flat pieces left, and we used those in our bathroom as kind of a chair rail. So that's my mom has used part of them in her kitchen too. So that's our nod to Lincoln School.
When he started putting those up, he really didn't have a good way to fasten them. So he took them all back down and put plywood up there so he could fasten the plywood easier. Then he had something solid to fasten those tin pieces to, and it really made them lay a lot better, a lot nicer, so they're nice and uniform.
Yeah. And that's what our house looks like today from the northwest. And the view from our deck, we have lovely, I can see my parents' farm and across the creek there, I guess across the creek. Across the creek. I got the best of both worlds with this because I got my old house, which I wanted, and I got a new basement because I'm not romantic enough about old houses to like old house basements. Every old house I've lived in is creepy and dark and damp, and there's an old shower in the corner that nobody uses and has spider webs on it. And I didn't want that, and we also got 2 extra bedrooms in the basement from that. So,
because it is brick, it is a 10-inch wall on the basement board wall, so it's a pretty heavy wall, pretty thick wall. But we get, you know, a lot of the plumbing down there is new, especially going out of the house and everything, so a lot of advantage to having that option there.
Yeah, a lot of people, you know, have asked us, have you noticed your house changing? And the house is all plaster. There's no drywall in the original house. And we have noticed over the last 20 years, there are walls that are beginning to have some cracks or some bulges. And we kind of expected that. They probably will have to be redone down the road, but really, amazingly, very, very little of anything else that we've noticed.
I think they're fine the way they are.
Yeah, until they fall off.
Yeah, when the porch was being, the front porch or office now was being remodeled, all of a sudden there was a crash and one section of the ceiling in the living room did fall down, so that had to be redone, but
Yeah,
that's the way life goes, I guess.
yeah. Oh, what did it cost? This is $1998. The house was $500 and moving it was around $22. And utilities and the police were $20. Our new basement was $18 and our putting a driveway in was about $3. And this doesn't include, of course, adding our breezeway and remodeling the kitchen and everything else. But we still thought we were getting a pretty good deal because we were where we wanted to be. We had a house we loved. Yeah, it was a win-win. People always say, well, would you do it again? I don't know, at our age, I probably wouldn't do it again. But for the first 5 years after we did it, I said to people, no, I don't think I would do it again. Now, yeah, looking back, if I were that age again, I would do it again. But it was a pretty time-intensive, labor-intensive job.
There are still windows that need work, need replacing. Those are the old single panes and they've got the storm windows on. They're not ideal, but they're kind of nice in a way. We can open those storm windows, are the ones that hinge on top and they kick out. And so if it's raining, you can have them open and you don't get any rain in the house. And it's really nice, you can get the breeze in there yet. We've done a lot of the windows. I think everything upstairs has been redone.
Yeah.
There's, don't think a lot of insulation in the walls, which is really hard to get to because of the brick. And I'm not sure if all houses are this way, but it's got all the shiplap on both sides, so it's really sturdy, good structured walls behind the brick and even on the plaster side. So it's pretty solid old house. It's in good shape and it holding up well for 3 kids and all their friends.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions? Yes?
I don't have a question, but I have a comment.
Okay.
I think Bruce commented, he said that house, Lottenbach had a bad day. That was Cass Lottenbach. He was a contractor and fell at that time. I don't know if Larry and so are the grandchildren and so, but Cass Lottenbach, he was a contractor. My grandpa, Garrett Terpster, worked for him for years. And Grandpa was talked about working on these houses, so he was instrumental in building a lot of these houses
Yeah.
in town.
And Mom, you said you went to the doctor there in that house that Andre owns. Nellie Kramer owned that
Nellie
house.
Kramer, she was a lot.
Harmon Kramer and his wife.
Yeah.
Harmon and Nellie, yes.
Harmon and Nellie.
Very good, down to that Nellie.
Has anyone else here moved a house at all? Or moved a... Oh, Bob.
I've got a question for you, Bill. You said you would do it again at this point. How about Kent? Would he do that again?
She told me to.
This is how we've lasted for almost 40 years.
Do as you're told, Bob. Do as you're told. I don't know if I'd move a brick house again because it is a lot more work. You cannot get, there's some beautiful new homes out there, but you think of today's costs and all costs are going up, but the old character and stuff about a whole home, we don't have pictures of it, but in the kitchen, and there's 2 corner china cabinets built in there. And they're just beautiful. You can't do that today without, just spending a tremendous amount of money to replicate that kind of stuff. So I think it would really depend on what the home looked like and what it had to offer. But you can't beat the old charm of the old homes.
Well, he knew when he married me I was an old house person. I I think I wrote in, or I said in your newsletter, I literally was the kid who was looking at the 1922 City of Pella history book, that section called The Beautiful Houses of Pella. And I was always asking people, well, where was this one? Because there were no addresses. That just made me crazy. And you could tell which ones were still there. And I've always loved old houses. And so I knew that, yeah, I would. Now, with that, of course, comes the old house basements. It comes, every house we've ever owned has had green shag carpeting somewhere. And you have to deal with that and layers and layers of wallpaper. Our house on University, we stripped off 6 or 7 layers. But that's part of the price of it, I guess.
The dining room area does have the pine center and the oak outside on the hardwood floor. And we had that refinished and just have a throw rug down there now. The kitchen had just a pine flooring, but we did have that refinished as well. It looked really cool for this pine floor.
Yeah.
It was really kind of neat.
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you for.
Thank you, Ken and Val, for making this presentation for us. I wasn't quite sure what direction they were going to go because they've had some really neat old house experiences. And I think of the 3 houses you lived in here in Pella, they're no longer existing. The one on Franklin Street was right beside my parents' home, and it's no longer existing either. And there's a lot of people who come at you with logic that, well, you can't afford to fix up that house, you know, because we'll give you this much money for it. You can't afford to replace the historic home you had if it's in good condition, exactly like it was. So moving a house or restoring a house is cost effective. Your foundation is the most important part. And as long as it has a good roof and a good foundation, it is going to be stronger than many of the newer houses. So I want to thank you all for coming this evening. There is a quote from Eunice Volkers, who kind of established the story, or, you know, she was before my time with Historic Pella Trust, but she's been very helpful as a mentor for me ever since. So she's stayed in touch ever since, at least monthly. But that's kind of a special saying. We have some volunteer opportunities. You know, we built that fantastic new Tuttle Learning Walk, and now everyone wants to come see Tuttle Cabin. And if you have some extra time and would like to volunteer some hours there, I would very much appreciate it. We have the 2nd grade field trips, which we established before I started. And it's just a really neat living history activity where the kids come for a morning and we participate in things like we tell the Tuttle story and the Sculty story. We talk about planting the 3 sisters. We play marbles and we do laundry on the washboard. Those all take about 6 or 7 volunteers. So before next spring, before I offer this again, I need some, you know, energetic people that love young people to step forward and help me with this project. I want to thank you all for your support of Historic Pella Trust, and your support for building the Tuttle Learning Walk.